Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Villanova Tip Time. I'm your host, Chris Notaro. Today is Saturday, February 13th, and we have one of the most exciting matchups of the Villanova basketball season so far. Sure, we got some really good ranked early season matchups, but this is, easily the most exciting game on our conference calendar. We thought it was going to be in all the preseason rankings. Both teams have mostly lived up to the hype. I would say Creighton is, starting a preseason top 10. They've been up and down. They've slipped now to 19th overall in the nation, but still having a really strong season. And we're really excited for some Cats basketball today, coming up at the top of the hour on Fox. But before we do that, we're going to go around the horn at the top of college basketball. Normally, we talk about some of the biggest games of the week. We'll highlight that. Although there hasn't been a ton of action since we last saw you on Wednesday night, the most important thing is going to be to talk about the selection committee's first official preview, which came out earlier today. We're going to check in on some of our Cats in the NBA. Really, the reason for this segment is going to be Saddiq Bey's monster game last night for the Pistons. We'll get into that momentarily. And then we're going to recap Nova Marquette a little bit and talk about where this Villanova team stands as it goes into its biggest game so far on the conference schedule. We'll introduce you to the Creighton Blue Jays team and finally what to expect from today's action between the Villanova Wildcats and the Creighton Blue Jays live from Omaha at the top of the hour. So kicking things off around the top of college basketball, like I said, not a ton going on. We last saw you on Wednesday night. There haven't been a ton of marquee games. There were some really good ones earlier today, though. I think highlighted most specifically by number 12 Oklahoma at number 14 West Virginia in a 2-overtime thriller that Oklahoma held on to win by 1 point, 91-90. So that was definitely the game of the day so far. Also worth mentioning, number 16 Tennessee, fresh off of a listing as a 3 seed in the selection committee's preview, did lose earlier today at LSU. And then honorable mention we're going to throw out to Loyola Chicago, where Drake had made sort of the headlines for creeping into the top 25, having an undefeated season. They've now suffered their second loss in a row, this time to now ranked Loyola Chicago and division foe for Drake. Loyola Chicago ranked 22nd. Worth noting, Loyola Chicago went into the halftime of that game down a few points and steamrolled Drake in the second half by, I believe, a second half score of 50-20, winning that second half by 30 points. So kudos to Loyola Chicago for earning that top 25 ranking. After Drake started to get some buzz and some press, definitely don't like to see them falter, but an interesting storyline nonetheless. So we switch gears over to the selection committee's first official preview that came out today. On the one line, you see Gonzaga, Baylor, Michigan, and Ohio State. Some things to call out there is, Gonzaga's been holding down that number 1 ranking in the polls consistently, so not necessarily surprised to see them in that number 1 overall seed spot. However, a lot of the reporting was that it was pretty close in the selection committee's discussions and that the edge going to Gonzaga with one additional quad 1 win, more so than Baylor. And it'd be interesting to see how that might change if Baylor can run the rest of his schedule. Now, worth noting, both Baylor and Michigan, both on that number 1 line, are in the midst of a COVID pause. And so we're wondering how much that's benefiting them, just like it may have benefited Villanova earlier in the season when Villanova had a month off, because they haven't had to be challenged, right? They've been just sitting there, especially for Baylor in that really strong Big 12. Will be interesting to see, but they have of their remaining games that they're expected to play once they come off the COVID pause, they do play ranked 23rd Oklahoma State, and then they have their last game of the season at Kansas. So I believe that Kansas game is going to count as a quad 1 win if they can notch the win there. And then, of course, they may have conference championship games as well. So it'll be interesting to see if Baylor can catch up. If Baylor can run the table, can they catch up and overtake for that number 1 overall seed from Gonzaga, who is very likely to run the table with what we've described as sort of their powder puff conference schedule, despite having a really, really strong non-conference schedule earlier in the season, Gonzaga did. So looking at the 2 line, you have Illinois, Villanova, Alabama, and Houston. So Villanova coming in there as a 2 seed, the number 6 overall seed. You have to like where the Cats are placed today as a 2 seed in the bracket with Ohio State. I think you should also look ahead to the fact that Villanova is only going to have 2 more ranked matchups, this one today with Creighton, and then it looks like the Big East has gone ahead and added a second Creighton game to the tail end of Villanova's schedule. I believe it's the second to last game on the schedule now. And if Villanova is able to run the table there, you like them to be able to potentially jump back into that number 1 conversation, almost assuredly, actually, because ahead of them, in the immediate 3 spots ahead of them, you have 3 Big Ten teams who all have pretty tough remaining schedules, given that the Big Ten is so loaded this year. And in fact, they all sort of play each other. So you might see a lot of moving and shaking on the low end of the 1 tier and the high end of the 2 tier as things shake out with these conference schedules. Like I said, Michigan, Ohio State, and Illinois probably going to cannibalize each other a little bit. So Michigan is, again, currently on a COVID pause, so possibly benefiting from that. But they likely still, after they get back from that pause, are going to have games at 21-ranked Wisconsin, at number 4 Ohio State, and then 15th ranked Iowa, also remaining on Michigan's schedule. So that's a tough remaining slate. Ohio State has been absolutely rolling lately, notching some really quality wins and consistently showing up, not even really letting bad teams even get close to them when they're playing less than average teams. They've been rolling lately, but again, they still have Michigan on the calendar. They have number 15 Iowa, and they have number 6 Illinois. So again, you're sort of seeing this round robin of these teams that might cannibalize each other on the 1 and the 2 line from the selection committee's first preview today. The hottest pick that I've heard as far as teams that aren't in the top 4 seeds right now is Wisconsin, far and away the team that people think can make the most noise. They have a couple of big games left on their schedule to be able to creep their way up to the 4 line or maybe even the 3 line. And then I would say of the teams listed on the 3 and 4 line, the teams that seem most dangerous to me as far as you don't want to see them as a 3 or a 4 are going to be Iowa, who's currently holding it down as a 4 seed. Texas Tech and Texas also both holding it down as 4 seeds. I think those teams are much better caliber than a 4 seed would suggest. So it'll be really interesting to see how that shakes out as we get a little closer on. So like I said, checking in on our NBA Wildcats, we had to add this segment today because Saddiq Bey had such a monster game last night. For any of you Villanova fans that follow your standard Villanova Twitter accounts, both official and unofficial, the clips were going haywire because not only did Saddiq Bey score 30 points last night, which is puts him among distinguished rookies in Detroit Pistons history to reach that mark in general, but he was also 7 of 7 from 3. So a nice trend you see this week with not only Saddiq Bey in the NBA. We saw Jeremiah Robinson-Earl 5 for 5 from 3 earlier this week in the Marquette game. So we're seeing a lot of synergy in Cats getting hot from deep. But that Saddiq Bey 7 of 7 mark was something that really left him in a standalone category. I think it was something like, he's only like the 4th rookie in NBA history to be perfect from 3 with that many attempts. So really awesome to see him getting more starts, getting his game average up towards double digits, and proving himself to be an impact player early for this Detroit Pistons team. And while we're talking about Cats in the NBA, we'd be remiss if we didn't call out some of the other guys doing great things around the league, I should say. Goes without saying, Kyle Lowry, that old stalwart and perennial all-star. We're not going to spend too much time there, but NBA champion, NBA legend, Villanova legend at this point. But of the more recent guys coming out of the Villanova program, you see Mikal Bridges and the Suns averaging 14.5 a game and 4.5 rebounds a game, being a real impact player on that Suns team that may surprise some people in the West this year. You see Dante DiVincenzo averaging just shy of double digits for the Milwaukee Bucks, and he's turned into a guaranteed starter basically for one of the elite teams in the East. Jalen Brunson's been in the news this week. He scored 21 off the bench for the Mavericks earlier this week. And then finally, you have Josh Hart and Ryan Arcidiacono, who I also want to call out. Josh Hart's gotten a few starts this year for the Pelicans. Ryan Arcidiacono, not as much in the news. He's been battling injuries this year, but he signed a solid contract with the Chicago Bulls and has some roster safety there. So all in all, years ago, this Villanova program and Coach Jay Wright in particular, not necessarily known for cranking out NBA players. I've not so jokingly referred to them as MBAU recently, especially with a friend of mine who's a Georgetown alum and likes to throw some haterade, throw some shade our way. I like to remind him every time we see, Bridges go off or now Sadiq Bey after a game like last night. You can bet I was sending some links his way. All right, so where are we at, Nova Nation? Let's talk about the current state of this Villanova team. I think the place to start off is obviously with a recap of the Marquette game on Wednesday night. It's pretty easy to say Nova Nation went to bed pretty happy on Wednesday, even though, the game was definitely within reach for Marquette until probably somewhere, let's call it like around 8 minutes into the second half is when the Cats really started to pull away. And then the final score was just, out of this world, with the Cats just completely running it up and winning by 30. I don't know that was necessarily indicative of how the whole game went, especially with the first half seemed like was a little closer. And again, it was one of those games where Villanova was clearly the better team on the floor, even when the teams were playing it a little closer. This game was easily the prettiest box score that we've seen from Villanova in a while, maybe all year, highlighted by 63% overall shooting and 59% shooting from three. That is insane. Those are insane numbers. Not something you can expect night in, night out, but when you get it, it's like lightning in a bottle, and it's just amazing to watch. So to rattle off, you've got Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, who had 27 points, 8 boards, 3 steals, and an assist. Worth calling out that he was 10 of 11 overall from the field, and he was 5 of 5 from deep. So just a monster game from Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, likely and maybe his best game as a Villanova Wildcat so far. And what you would like to say is great to see from him. He sort of looked like he may be in a little bit of a midseason lull, even though he's landed on the Naismith Award top 20 finalist list. So having a spectacular season by any measure. But it was nice to see him have a dominant game, especially in this warm-up for this Creighton game, where he is, I would say Jeremiah Robinson-Earl is poised to have a big impact, which we'll cover in a moment. Colin Gillespie had a really impressive triple-double. Double-double, not quite a triple-double. Don't want to overhype. But with 16 points and 11 assists, that's a beautiful stat line from him. Jermaine Samuels continuing his strong campaign, especially over the last, call it 10 games. Really had some of those cobwebs early. Since coming out of the COVID pause, though, in the 5 or 6 games we've had since then, he scored in double digits. He's been a factor on both ends of the ball. Intensity, senior leadership, everything you're wanting to see from him. And I think what we saw from this Nova team on Wednesday night, granted, Marquette's, not necessarily a great team. They've notched 2 top 10 wins, though. They're definitely by no means a bad team. And I think when Villanova plays like that, they're going to be able to run with the best teams in the country. Honorable mention for Villanova Twitter, as we finally saw Brian Anton get into the game. Shout out to Brian in New York City, who's been calling for it for a while. However, it was, 5 or so garbage minutes towards the very end as Nova started to pull away. Will we see Brian Anton play meaningful minutes? And by meaningful minutes, I mean in a game that's somewhat close. Maybe, but I'm thinking at this point it would likely be in like an intense foul trouble situation where you just, you needed to go to him for lack of any other options. So where are we overall heading into this huge game on our schedule? Like I said, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, it broke out for his best game of the season after battling through a little midseason lull. He and Colin Gillespie are both on that Naismith Award top 20 finalist list. And Jermaine Samuels has found himself after a slow start to now be playing the best basketball of his Villanova career. So you absolutely like the arc that this team is traveling on. I would say Justin Moore and Caleb Daniels round out the best starting 5 in the Big East. We're going to put that to the test today, as Creighton themselves has 5 players averaging double digits. So we're going to put that moniker on the line today. But this Villanova starting 5 can go up there with the best of them in the country right now. This team's ceiling is possibly limitless. They can definitely go on a deep March run. I would say they also have a lower floor than some of our recent championship teams, just due to some depth issues and some cold shooting bouts. On that note, I wouldn't be being fair if I didn't list off some of the question marks, some of the things we're looking at as fans for the team to hopefully improve upon as we head here into March. Number 1 would be the turnover bug. I think easiest to cover this first because personally I'm not terribly worried about it. We've just seen an uptick in this area over the last few games that you'd like to see them smooth out before March. I think the biggest concern for a lot of folks is going to be the depth. So are Slater, Swider, and Dixon enough if any of the starters, or God forbid 2+ of the starters, get into foul trouble? We would love to see national champion Demir Cosby-Roundtree back, but he had surgery, I believe, about 2 to 3 weeks ago now on an injury that's kept him out all season. Getting him back for a March run would be amazing and huge for depth, but I think probably really unlikely at this point that we see him play this season. So looking at the clock here, we've got about 5 minutes left to tip off. And man, I have to say, I was really excited for today's show. I was also really excited. I'm just really excited for today's game. I feel like the timing of this game is perfect. The sun's still shining, so you're getting that winter vitamin D for those of us that are in the northern half of the country and struggling with the crazy winter weather that we all seem to be getting from Northeast to the Midwest and beyond. But today's game, like I said, is a matchup of the two best starting fives in the Big East. And it's really the matchup of the day in college basketball. A lot to live up to now with that Oklahoma-West Virginia game going to double overtime. But this is a very nice dessert for those of you that dined on that game earlier. So who is this year's Creighton squad? So to call out, probably the most obvious thing is they are a guard-heavy style of play, very similar to Villanova. So you're going to see their identity really wrapped around junior guard Marcus Zagrowski, who, many of you have heard his name because he was hyped up in the preseason as not only a possible Big East player of the year, but a guy who could be in that national player of the year conversation. And he hasn't quite lived up to that height, at least not statistically. But he's still averaging about 14.5 points a game, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. And again, the identity of this Creighton team runs through Marcus Zagrowski. And he at any given night, especially with his ability to sort of not only command the offense as a whole, but start raining threes when he decides to click it on. He is definitely the biggest impact player on the floor for Creighton. Another guy to look out for is going to be senior guard Denzel Mahoney, who actually leads the team in scoring, which surprises many, again, because of what I just said about Zagrowski, where most people were assuming he was going to come in and be like a player of the year type. But it's actually senior guard Denzel Mahoney that's leading the team in scoring right now, just edging Zagrowski by 0.1 points a game. So Denzel Mahoney's averaging 14.5, Zagrowski's averaging 14.4. This really shouldn't surprise anybody. If you look, Mahoney's a senior. If you look 2 years ago in his sophomore year, he played in a ton of games and he was averaging 19 points a game. So he absolutely has it in him. Keep going through the starting five here for Creighton. You're going to look at Mitch Bollock, who's their sniper. He's averaging around 10 points a game, but he's joining Zagrowski, hovering right about that 40% mark from three. So, and I believe in their last game, he had just an absolutely monster game going crazy from deep. And then finally, so those are your three major guards coming out of their starting lineup. But then you have a pair of good forwards in Damian Jefferson and Christian Bishop, round out that solid starting five. But also worth noting that Coach McDermott at Creighton does have about a 9-deep rotation. So you're going to see him throw plenty of looks at this Villanova team, including from a 7-foot freshman. Worth noting, I think the player to call out is Christian Bishop. As somebody who watches my nightly dose of SportsCenter, whenever you see Creighton highlights, as much as you see the name Marcus Zagrowski, I would say Christian Bishop is the name you're seeing second most. He has the ability to sort of take over games. He's had a few good breakout games over the last month or so. So he's another player that you would key in on for today. So now as we're getting down into the last 90 seconds or so of the show before tip time, what do we think about today's game? Well, the pro handicappers, unfortunately for you, Nova Nation, do all seem to be liking Creighton plus 2.5. I believe that line has moved to as much as Creighton plus 3 points. And the pro handicappers are probably correct. I think based on the sheer math of the situation, this probably should have been Villanova's underdog day. But yet somehow Creighton is still getting 3 points as a 3-point underdog at home. So interesting to watch, and I do expect this game to be very close, as do most. Hello, Captain Obvious. Many folks are loving the over of 144. Worth noting, the other night against Marquette, the over-under was, I think, 138.5, and they hit it with like 10 minutes left in the game. It wasn't even close. So if, given that I think what you're looking for in today's game is who has the hotter hand from three, you have to like that over of 144. Now, segueing into that point about 3-point shooting, it's sort of a foregone conclusion with a Villanova team this year or any year that the game against a really strong opponent is often likely going to come down to the 3-point shooting advantage. And today is really no different. Creighton likes to shoot the three. We like to shoot the three. The team that shoots the three better, has the higher percentage, and gets more open looks from three is likely going to have a significant advantage in this game. One thing to note, shout out to our friends at vuhoops.com for the preview they did of the game, where they call out that Creighton's forwards, Damian Jefferson and Christian Bishop, aren't actually that big, and Creighton does let up a lot of offensive rebounds. So that figures to have Jeremiah Robinson-Earl and maybe even Jermaine Samuels, who's been rebounding strong as of late, possibly create an advantage on the offensive boards. And the interior might play a huge part in today's game, because if you figure both teams are about evenly matched from three, which team can take advantage of those interior looks per VU Hoops pregame breakdown is going to be, could be the difference in this one. We'll sign off here. Turn your channels to Fox. Get ready for some Villanova action. Big thanks to other Villanova content creators, including our friends at the Full 40 podcast, who have given us some extra love this week and have given us an extra viewership bump. Really appreciate that, and love to see all the great Nova content being created out there. Huge day for Villanova today. Go Cats, go get them, and have a great time. Have a great day. We'll see you later this week.